Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into this fascinating concept called participation mystique. You know, that feeling of getting swept up in something bigger than yourself, like you're at a concert or a sporting event and you kind of lose yourself in the energy of the crowd.
Right.
Well, it turns out there's a whole lot more to it than just that.
Yeah, you're right. Participation mystique, it's a pretty deep psychological phenomenon. Actually, it was first explored by anthropologists who were studying how humans connect. But it was really Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, who kind of put it on the map. He saw it as the sort of unconscious merging of our identity with something outside of ourselves.
Okay, so it's not just about like vibing with the crowd at a concert, though I guess that's like a little piece of it.
It's deeper,
It goes
right?
way deeper, yeah. Picture this. You're at a political rally. You're totally captivated by a charismatic speaker. The energy is just electric. Everyone's chanting. And you might even find yourself like agreeing with things you wouldn't normally or acting in ways that you're like, wait, was that really me? Oh, wow, that's kind of scary. So you're saying in that moment, like your own critical thinking just kind of goes out the window. You're not exactly yourself anymore.
You hit the nail on the head. You're basically participating in a collective identity. Your sense of self is merging with the group, the ideology, the speaker's persona. And this, can obviously have both positive and negative consequences.
Okay, yeah, let's definitely talk about those consequences a little later. But first, I'm really curious about how Jung connected participation mystique to his idea of the collective unconscious.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. So Jung believed that this collective unconscious, it's like a reservoir of shared instincts and archetypes and symbols that we've all inherited from our ancestors. It explains why certain themes and symbols like resonate across different cultures and different time periods. Think about like the universal fear of the dark or the hero's journey narrative. You see that in stories all over the world, right? Jung would say these are echoes of our shared human experience and they're like embedded deep within us.
Wow, so it's like these ancient echoes are still influencing us even today, bubbling up in how we behave in groups, how we react to certain symbols, even maybe who we're drawn to.
Exactly. And that's what makes participation mystique so powerful and, potentially tricky. It's not just some abstract idea, it's playing out in our lives constantly.
Okay, so besides that political rally example, where else are we seeing participation mystique in action?
Oh, it's everywhere. Think about mob mentality, that classic example of people losing themselves in a crowd and doing things they'd never do if they were alone. Their usual moral compass, it kind of just gets overridden by the group's energy.
It's like the individual gets drowned out by the collective roar of the crowd.
Exactly. And this dynamic, it doesn't just apply to negative scenarios either. Think about the feeling you get during a religious ceremony or a big festival. That sense of unity, of transcendence. People feel profoundly connected to something larger than themselves.
Right? Those massive celebrations where everyone's united in dance and song, rituals that have been passed down for generations.
Precisely. But even in those seemingly positive instances, there's still the potential for losing your individual perspective. Oh, and we can't forget about relationships. Ever notice how easy it is to project your own desires or fears onto your partner? You kind of lose sight of who they truly are.
Ooh, okay, now participation mystique is hitting a little too close to home.
Ah.
This is definitely giving me a lot to think about. So, is this merging with the group always a bad thing? Can it be beneficial?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It's not so black and white. Participation mystique is a double-edged sword.
Okay, well, I'm ready to hear about both sides of that sword. Tell me more.
On the positive side, think about the power of shared purpose, like
Mhm.
in social movements or community initiatives. People come together driven by a common goal and they achieve incredible things.
Yes, that feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself, it can be so inspiring, so
Yeah,
motivating.
absolutely. But then, on the flip side, that same sense of unity can be used to manipulate and control people. Think about propaganda, cults. They thrive on exploiting people's desire to belong, their willingness to surrender their critical thinking to a charismatic leader or an ideology.
Yikes. Okay, that's a little unsettling.
Mhm.
So how do we recognize when we're being influenced by participation mystique? Like, what are some red flags?
That's where self-awareness is key. You got to ask yourself, are my actions and beliefs really my own right now, or am I just echoing the group?
So it's like taking a mental step back from the crowd and asking, wait, do I actually agree with this?
Exactly. Another red flag is when information is presented in a way that discourages critical thinking or questioning. Like if you're being told to blindly trust the leader or to reject anyone who disagrees, that's a sign that participation mystique might be at play.
So any group that discourages individual thought and demands absolute loyalty, that's a big warning sign.
Absolutely. And this is especially relevant in today's world, Information overload, social media algorithms, these things can amplify these dynamics.
Right, I can see how easy it is to get swept up in online echo chambers where everyone's just reinforcing each other's beliefs without any critical examination.
Exactly. And this brings us to the crucial role of projection in participation mystique.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's projection got to do with all of this?
So projection, it's basically when we unconsciously attribute our own thoughts and feelings and desires to other people. We see in others what we want to see or what we fear, and it blurs the lines between our own inner world and external reality.
So it's like we're projecting our own stuff onto the leader, the group, the movement, whatever it is, and that makes us even more susceptible to their influence.
You got it.
Love
And
that.
that's why it's so important to develop self-awareness and critical thinking skills so we can start to recognize and manage these projections.
This is all starting to make sense. So if participation mystique can be both powerful and potentially dangerous, how do we navigate its influence in a healthy way? How do we, break free from that unconscious merging and reclaim our sense of self?
Well, that's where the concept of individuation comes in. Jung described it as the process of becoming a fully realized, unique individual.
Okay, I'm ready to level up. Tell me more about this individuation thing. How do we actually do it?
Well, it's a lifelong journey, but the first step is recognizing that it's even necessary. We've been exploring the downsides of merging with the collective, but individuation is about reclaiming your own agency, your own unique perspective.
So it's not about rejecting the collective altogether.
Yeah.
It's more about finding that sweet spot between belonging and being your own person.
You nailed it. It's a delicate dance for sure. We need connection, we need belonging, but we also need to cultivate our individual sense of self.
I love that analogy, the dance between belonging and being unique. So what are some of the steps involved in this individuation dance?
Well, we'll delve into that more after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to explore how to break free from the mystique and step into your own individuality.
So we're back, and before the break, we were talking about individuation being like this dance between belonging and being your own person.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like recognizing that tension and learning to kind of consciously navigate it. You see, Jung, he believed that individuation, it's a lifelong process, this journey of becoming more whole and integrated,
Yeah.
as individuals.
Okay, so it's not like there's this finish line, like, boom, you're individuated. It's more about, continually evolving and just being more self-aware.
Exactly. It's ongoing self-discovery. And a big part of that is understanding how participation mystique shows up in our lives. We've talked about some, more obvious examples like those political rallies and mob mentality, but it can be a lot more subtle too.
Okay, give me an example. How could participation mystique show up in a more subtle way?
Well, think about workplace culture. You might find yourself conforming to certain unwritten rules or behaviors, even if they don't really align with your values, because you don't want to rock the boat or be seen as an outsider.
Oh, so going along with the office gossip, even though you'd rather not, or participating in those after-work drinks, even if you'd rather just be at home with a good book.
Exactly. Or maybe you agree with your boss's opinions, even if you secretly disagree, just because you want to be seen as a team player, right? These are all subtle forms of participation mystique where you're kind of unconsciously merging with the group's norms and you end up sacrificing a bit of your individuality.
Yeah, that's a really helpful example. I can definitely see how easy it is to fall into those patterns without even realizing it. So how do we start to recognize those more subtle influences and, start making more conscious choices?
A good place to start is by paying attention to your emotional state. Notice how you feel in different group settings. Do you feel pressured to conform? Are you holding back your true thoughts and feelings?
It's like tuning into that inner voice that's saying, something doesn't feel quite right here.
Yes. Don't ignore those feelings. They're often signals that you're kind of sacrificing your individuality just to fit in. Another important step is cultivating your critical thinking skills.
So how do we actually do that? And it sounds great in theory, but what are some practical ways to strengthen our critical thinking muscles?
Well, one simple but really powerful practice is to question everything. Don't just accept information at face value, especially when it comes from authority figures or, people you admire. Ask yourself, what's the evidence? Are there other perspectives? Are there any biases at play here?
It's like that saying, trust but verify. Don't just blindly believe what you're told, even if it comes from a source you usually trust.
Exactly. And remember, critical thinking, it's not about being cynical or negative. It's about being curious, open-minded, and willing to consider all sides of an issue. It's about actively engaging with information rather than just passively absorbing it.
This is so helpful. I'm seeing how developing these skills can help us navigate the world in a way that's more conscious, more empowered.
Exactly. And you'll start to feel more individuated as you flex those critical thinking muscles. You'll be less likely to just follow the crowd or get swept up in that mystique.
So critical thinking, it's like a superpower that helps us break free from the matrix of participation mystique.
I love that analogy. And, once you start to see the matrix, it's hard to unsee it. You'll start to notice these dynamics everywhere, the media, advertising, social interactions.
It's all starting to click.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, is there a danger in going too far in the other direction? Like, can we become so focused on our individuality that we lose sight of, the importance of community and connection?
That's a great question, and it takes us back to that delicate balance between belonging and being unique. Individuation, it's not about isolating yourself or becoming a lone wolf. It's about realizing that you can be an individual A&D part of something bigger at the same time.
So it's finding that sweet spot where you're comfortable being yourself, but you're also like contributing to the collective good.
Yeah, you got it. Think of it like a choir. Each singer, they have their own unique voice, their own talent, but when they come together in harmony, they create something beautiful, something powerful, something greater than the sum of its parts.
That's beautiful. I love the choir analogy. It shows how our individual voices matter and how they can blend with others to create something really harmonious.
And that brings us to another key aspect of individuation, embracing your shadow side.
Okay, now things are getting really interesting. Tell me more about this shadow side and how it relates to becoming, a more individuated person.
Well, Jung believed that we all have a shadow side, this part of ourselves, that contains the qualities we deem unacceptable or undesirable. Traits we've been conditioned to repress or deny, like anger, selfishness, or vulnerability.
So it's like that part of ourselves we try to hide from the world and even, sometimes from ourselves.
Exactly. But Jung argued that integrating our shadow is actually essential for becoming whole, for being authentic. He believed that these shadow qualities, once we acknowledge them and understand them, they can actually become sources of strength and creativity.
So it's not about getting rid of our shadow, but more about accepting it and integrating it into our sense of self.
Exactly. When we deny or repress our shadow, it only makes it stronger and more likely to, manifest in unhealthy ways. But when we face those shadow qualities with courage and compassion, we can transform them into sources of growth and self-understanding.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together. By acknowledging and integrating our shadow, we're becoming more whole, more authentic, and ultimately more individuated.
Precisely. And as we get more comfortable with our own shadow, we're also more likely to accept the shadow in others. We become more compassionate, more understanding, and that strengthens our connections, deepens our sense of belonging.
It's a win-win. We become more whole as individuals. At ease, we help create a more compassionate, accepting world. This is giving me so much to think about.
That's the power of understanding these concepts. They give you a whole new lens to view yourself and your relationships with others.
Okay, so we've talked about critical thinking and embracing our shadow. What other key elements of individuation should we be aware of?
There's one more that's crucial: finding your unique purpose. Jung believed that everyone has a unique calling in life, something that gives their life meaning and direction. He called it our life's task.
So it's about discovering what makes us feel truly alive, what lights us up from the inside out.
Exactly. And this purpose, this calling, it can take so many forms. It might be your career, your relationships, creative pursuits, spiritual beliefs. It's about identifying what truly matters to you and then aligning your life with those values.
I can see how living in alignment with our purpose could help us feel a stronger sense of self and make us less susceptible to that pull of the collective.
Absolutely. When you're living your purpose, you're not so easily swayed by external pressures or expectations. You're more likely to trust your own inner compass and make decisions that are in alignment with your authentic self.
It's like you're drawing strength from this deep well within yourself rather than needing that external validation or approval.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. And here's the fascinating part. When we do this work of individuation, when we embrace our uniqueness and align with our purpose, we actually contribute to the collective in a much more meaningful way.
So it's not about withdrawing from the world and becoming totally self-absorbed. It's about becoming a more conscious and engaged participant.
Exactly. When you're grounded in your own authenticity, you bring something unique and valuable to the table. You can connect with others more genuinely, you can contribute your talents more fully, and you can even inspire others to embark on their own journeys of self-discovery.
I love that. It's like individuation isn't just about personal growth. It's also about contributing to a more vibrant and diverse world.
Precisely. It creates this ripple effect. As more individuals embrace their unique selves and live authentically, the collective benefits from that richness and diversity.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I'm seeing participation mystique and how it plays out in our lives on a whole new level. But we're not quite done yet, are we? There's still more to explore.
You're right. We've talked about self-awareness, critical thinking, embracing our shadow, finding our purpose. But there's one more piece of the puzzle: how to actually apply these concepts in our daily lives.
Okay, so that's the million-dollar question, right?
hmm
We have all this knowledge, but how do we translate it into action? How do we actually start living more consciously and authentically in a world that's constantly trying to pull us into that mystique?
Great question, and that's what we're going to explore next.
Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle that million-dollar question.
Yeah.
How do we actually take all of this awesome knowledge about participation mystique and individuation and apply it to our everyday lives?
Well, it's one thing to understand it in our heads, but it's another to actually live it. You know what I mean? The key is to turn understanding into action, into real changes in how you navigate the world.
So nodding along and saying, yeah, that makes sense is not enough. We've got to actually do something with these ideas, integrate them into our thoughts and behaviors, and even our relationships. But where do we even start with that?
A simple but powerful practice is to pay attention to your inner compass. We've talked a lot about self-awareness, and this is where it really matters. Just throughout your day, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Do I feel aligned with my values and my purpose? Or am I compromising myself to fit in or to please other people?
So it's about creating those mental checkpoints, those moments to reflect and ask ourselves, am I being true to myself right now?
Exactly. And those check-ins, they don't have to be long or complicated. It could be as simple as taking a few deep breaths before responding to a challenging email,
Right.
or noticing how your body feels when you're in a certain social situation.
I like that, tuning into our body's signals. Sometimes that gut feeling is trying to tell us something like, hey, this doesn't feel right. Maybe I need to step back and reevaluate.
Yes. Your body's a wise guide. It's always giving you feedback. Learning to listen to those signals, that's a big part of individuation. It's about trusting your gut, that inner knowing of what's right for you, even when, you've got all these external pressures pulling you in different directions.
That reminds me of something else we talked about, critical thinking.
Absolutely. Critical thinking, it's like a cornerstone of individuation. Question assumptions. Challenge the status quo. Seek out different perspectives. Don't just take things at face value, especially information designed to trigger strong emotions.
Oh yeah, like those attention-grabbing headlines or those inflammatory posts you see on social media. Before we hit that share button or get caught up in the outrage, maybe take a breath and ask ourselves, wait, is this information even reliable? What are the sources? Is this a balanced perspective, or is it trying to manipulate my emotions?
Exactly. And critical thinking, it's not just about analyzing information. It's also about examining our own beliefs and biases. Ask yourself, why do I hold this particular belief? Where did it come from? Is it based on actual evidence, or is it something I've just blindly accepted from my family or my culture or my social group?
It's like we become detectives of our own minds. We're uncovering those hidden influences that shape our thoughts and behaviors.
That's a great way to put it. And that kind of self-inquiry, it can be really liberating. You start to see the world with new eyes. You start to question assumptions that you maybe held for years, and you can make more conscious choices about what you believe and how you want to live.
That is so empowering. It's like we're taking back our power to choose how we experience the world instead of just being, passively swept along by the currents of the collective.
You got it. And this brings us to another practical tip. Be a little skeptical of charismatic leaders and those groups that demand, unquestioning loyalty.
So we're talking about those figures who act like they have all the answers, who promise these easy solutions to complex problems and encourage their followers to just trust them blindly.
Yeah, those are some classic signs that a leader or a group might be taking advantage of participation mystique. Remember, healthy groups, They encourage individual thought and open dialogue and respectful disagreements. They don't demand blind obedience or punish people for asking questions.
So it's about being choosy about who we follow and what messages we allow ourselves to believe, right?
Right. And remember, even groups and leaders with good intentions can slip into these patterns of manipulation. It's always a good idea to use those critical thinking skills, ask questions, and trust your own inner guidance.
This is so helpful. But I'm also thinking, in a world that feels so polarized and divided, how can we have these difficult conversations without getting pulled into that participation mystique vortex?
That's a great question. Part of the answer is remembering that you don't have to agree with someone to connect with them. You can strongly disagree with someone's opinions and still respect them as a person.
So finding that balance between standing firm in your own convictions while still being open to hearing other perspectives, even when they challenge your own.
Yeah. And it takes a willingness to step outside of that black and white, us versus them thinking that, drives so much polarization. Most issues are complex. There are multiple valid viewpoints.
And even within the groups that we identify with, there's room for those nuances and disagreements. It's not about just conforming to some rigid ideology.
That's right. True belonging, it allows for individual expression, for differences of opinion, for healthy debate. In fact, those differences can actually enrich a group's understanding and lead to more creative solutions.
That's encouraging to hear. It's like we're being reminded that we can be individuals and still be part of a community. We can have different opinions without tearing each other apart.
Exactly. And that's what individuation's all about. Becoming more fully ourselves so we can contribute our unique gifts to the world while also recognizing our interconnectedness with everyone else.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about myself and how I interact with the world.
I'm so glad to hear that. Just remember, individuation, it's a journey, not a destination. It's a process of self-discovery, growth, and evolution that lasts a lifetime.
And to everyone listening, as you go about your day, remember to tune in to your inner compass. Cultivate those critical thinking skills, embrace your shadow side, and align yourself with your own unique purpose. And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, to question assumptions, to stand strong in your convictions, but also be open to hearing different perspectives.
And never forget, the world needs your unique voice, your individual perspective, your authentic self.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into participation, mystique, and individuation. We hope you've gained some valuable insights that can help you move through the world in a way that feels more conscious and empowered. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.